Thank you. I really hope that this project will come to fruition because we all know that Ghana will be the winner if we continue. Still on tourism. The UNWTO World Tourism Barometer has indicated that international tourism arrivals declined by 69%. And we all know that in Ghana, tourism is the fourth foreign exchange earner. We also know as a fact that tourism is public sector-led, private sector-driven. And so without the private sector, tourism is not going anywhere. I am therefore surprised that in the 2021 budget, I don't see the private sector anywhere in the budget, especially the pages that talk about tourism. I don't see any package that seeks to bring the tourism private practitioners out of the woods. We know that their businesses has decreased by 69%, yet there is nothing about them in terms of packages or anything that helps them to bring their businesses back. What do you say to that?
Thank you very much indeed. I think the woes of the tourism industry are quite clear, and you correctly do characterize it. In our 2020 sort of rescue package, we had a 2 billion guarantee facility to support various industries, especially in the hospitality area. In this budget, you realize that there's a tax deductibility for tourism, hospitality, and other companies of that sort. But I think what is also going to be an intervention, as I mentioned earlier in the morning, is the establishment of our National Development Bank, which will be a warehouse bank, which can then funnel resources into specific banks that allocate resources to these areas that need a stimulus. So the banking structure, the financial structure, we are strengthening it with the entry of the National Development Bank to be able to support areas such as that. So yes, there was a 2 billion guarantee facility in 2020, and then this year also we have put in place some tax reliefs to be able to support them further. And thirdly, once the development bank is also operational, that gives access to more capital to support them. But as we, Mr. Chairman, as the AFCFTA is located in Ghana, I think it gives us a mandate for investment tourism opportunities to clear so that we become a regional hub, and that certainly will also help in this regard.
Now to the financial sector cleanup. Can you apprise us with how much was used to clean the bank and how much was needed to save them?
Honourable Member, I think we have ruled that since we have decided...
No, that one is not about whether he closed the bank legally or not legally. It's just about whether it could have been saved. So it's not the bank, not the court matter.
The quantum of the indebtedness.
Yes, please.
Very well.
Not the court one. I am conscious of being prejudicial. Like how much was used to clean the banks and how much did they need to survive?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think so far, you know, the processes of the whole bank cleanup is really the purview of the Bank of Ghana. You know, so let's have a clarity on the asset quality reviews and all of those analyses that were done and their recommendation as to how to go forward to create a robust banking infrastructure. And as we can see, the results have been quite stellar because we have a much stronger banking infrastructure than we had in 2017 or 16. So the decisions as to what the banks require for acquisition or cleanup is also, in a sense, directed by the Bank of Ghana as to whom they will accept as banks, and how to save depositors' money, etc. So we spent north of 21 billion on the banks, and I think the target for the asset management companies may be as high as 8.5 billion that we are looking at. So far, we have intervened with maybe $2 or $3 billion to SEC towards resolution of that. I think some of the AMCs took us to court, which meant that we couldn't proceed with the depositors. And we sat down to determine ourselves that, well, even if the owners are taking us to court, we have every reason as a government to look at the depositors and try and put something there in the interim before that is solved. So that was a humanitarian and clear act, and we have done so. As I mentioned earlier, we expect by the third or fourth quarter the asset management companies will also be done, and then we'll look at consolidation of all of our debts in one piece. But I think the objective should be really clear to us. Sometimes we forget. Imagine, just close your eyes and imagine 4.6 million depositors on the roads in our towns like the Great Depression because they have lost their money. It is then that you begin to tease out whether truly, this thing was necessary. May they have been cost overruns? We don't know, but we think we've done the best that the country deserved, and the results are quite clear. When something is working, you kind of take it for granted until it is not there, and you see a whole cascading effect of men's gold or whatever around the nation, and you realize that this was a bold act to be taken with certain consequences, but all in all, the survival of the country and the banking system was saved. And I think I really share in the President's view of congratulating the Bank of Ghana for coming through and us for finding the resources. So even as I talk about $21 billion of shareholder, of taxpayers' money, it did still come to the taxpayers in the sense that their deposits were saved, which might not have been saved.
Yeah, well, this will be my last.
That's more.
So should I take it that for the amount of money that was needed to save the banks, you are not in a position to tell us, Bank of Ghana, or rather be in a position to tell us the amount of money that could have been used to save the banks?
As far as we know, Mr. Chairman, is the 21 billion that we have stated, because that is what we use, and possibly another 8 billion for the asset management companies. Thank you.
That will be all, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Honorable Bama.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Minister, congratulations. Minister, the Ghanaian business community is looking up to you and Honorable Chair Martin, the Trade Minister, to put in place deliberate measures and strategies to revive local businesses and to make them very competitive, especially with the coming into force of AFTA and also with COVID-19 challenges. The service sector is on the decline, the oil and gas sector, contractors have issues with payments, publishers, manufacturers, and the whole business community is looking up to you and the Trade Minister. What deliberate strategies programs are you going to put in place to give them the confidence that this government under President Akufo-Addo wants to bring them up to that status of being very competitive within the sub-region and globally? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is a whole thesis of industrial development, but it's an important, very important question. A center-right party obviously believes in the promotion of business, and I think modern day theory also talks about an entrepreneurial state in which the state becomes a booster to support enterprises to grow. I think you can begin to see some green shoots of recovery with regards to our approach to MBSSI and the monies we gave to ensure that small and medium enterprises begin to get the confidence and have access to resources. You know that Exim Bank has, over these 4-year periods, been able to fund quite a number of companies, including a Kumfi as an example of what can be done. But we see the huge gap between our savings capacity and financial resources. So the question really for government is either A, whether you can create a domestic environment that is stable, and you can see lending rates trending down, not as fast as we'd want. You can see even in the COVID period, the foreign exchange was about 3.9% or so, which is very helpful for industry. Of course, demand has been torpedoed over this period, but it's a good time to begin to assess the market and what you did. And we ourselves were impressed with their response to the production of PPEs over that time, and we got some resources to support them. The key issue in our mind is whether we can find a vehicle that would bring in other capital, and that is where the intervention of the new development bank is concerned, so that we can, and that one is supposed to be $1 billion capitalized. I think we have about 500 million sewn up already, which we will. So we expect that in May that will happen. In 2020, we did set up a guarantee fund of $2 billion. We have given some tax rebates for this budget, and truly our aim is to work with them to further give them certain stimulus that will help them to rebuild. So the whole of our Tampa project, really in the end, it's about how to grow businesses for Ghana to become a regional hub in that, which will extend their market share. So, Mr. Chairman, that is front and center to us, and I think we'll continue to have meetings with them to make sure that that happens. But on the back of that, Mr. Chairman, is the President's vision to also turn, literally every resource we have with value add. And that is going to be a key way to get more entrepreneurs, graduating from medium level to large status. And we tend to do that for our nation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Chairman, my second question is on the revenue side. And yesterday we had a very good interaction with your team from the GRA. We know the intentions of government, and we also know the intentions of the citizens. But when it comes to the payment of taxes and other levies becomes an issue, yet we want everything done immediately. Property tax and its collection and other revenue mobilization strategies, especially property tax. I recall the former senior minister saying that we could raise as much as 10 billion if you're able to put the right strategies in place. People can stand and boast of having 100 houses, but yet if you ask them how much they pay for property taxes, I think it's sometimes sickening to hear how much they pay. Revenue collection strategies, especially property rates. What can we do to enhance it? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think the issue of revenue collection certainly has been the bane of the country. We have sort of ranged between 13 and 15% of GDP, which is under, maybe what is happening in West Africa, 18 to 20, and the OECD countries almost 32%. So when you imagine that GRA is, let's say, about 14, 15, and you are moving it to 20, $45 billion, another 15 billion, that would be like 60 billion. You can see the increment. Property taxes, as you mentioned, senior minister did take it on as an area in which we're going to do a lot of work. The Vice President office has also done so. And we need to get this all, in a way, digitalized so that we can have it easily done. And digitalization exercise, as you know, has improved tremendously. And right now, we are going to transfer the 15.5 million odd people who have their national IDs onto the GRA list, etc. So you are beginning to now close the circle as to transactions you do and traceability. So you are going to be able to have big data in a way in which, we know where you live, we know whether you buy a car, we know whether you buy an airline ticket, and literally could construct your tax returns at the end of April for you. I think it's going to lead to a better ability to determine where these properties are to be able to tax them. So it's key, and the other issue there is property taxes usually are of local government. But if we at GRA have the infrastructure, we'll then have to come to some agreement as to how to do it. The challenge, Mr. Chairman, for us then is a look into the management of the districts, because you are then going to have an incredible amount of resources going to these districts, and therefore the governance structure to ensure that, A, they are empowered with skills, and B, the whole issue of managing their hospitals, their schools, etc., draws in the citizenry for empowerment and an ability to ensure that the district assemblies are accountable and that those resources are used very well. I'm not completely convinced at this juncture that the administrative management of resources at the level that you or guest house are even comfortable with. So even as we push for the realization of property taxation, is also a looking from the House to see what we can do to ensure that these new monies are not going to be wasted, and you are going to have strong municipalities who are cleaning their gutters, setting up their security system, in a way in which the citizens can also challenge them and make sure that all of these areas develop in tandem with the capital cities. Thank you.
Chairman, to my third question, the Bank of Ghana at their recent MPC Monetary Policy Committee kept the policy rate at 14.5%. It signals a certain response from the banks and the financial sector as to how credit is on lent to banks and how it trickles down. Banks are complaining about corporate tax, national reconstruction levy, banking sector cleanup, and other related costs. Do we have a strategy in place where they wouldn't, for want of these strategies that the central bank is put in place, not transfer those costs to SMEs so as to not to affect their businesses, and in so doing affect customers of the banks and SMEs? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I think, Mr. Chairman, the issue, as we sit, either Ministry of Finance looking at the whole of financial landscape, the Bank of Ghana, these 3-4 years, has been pretty decisive, courageous, and promotional. And we can see the forbearances that they gave in 2020 to make sure that these banks do well. I think the banks would also admit that they are a far cry from what they were in 2016 or early 2017, and their numbers do reflect that. But I think even more important is their confidence the banking supervision is working much better than it used to work. And that, when you are in the industry, is huge comfort to you. I think the numbers at the stage of 2021, with the pandemic, with second and third spikes around the world, a lack of security on global supply chains, a country that does not have a reserve currency, may lead to some sort of caution. MPCs are not annual, and so the ability to titrate and therefore decide on whether it should be lower or higher is still with us. I don't think we can use, it is not a budget that we can say that nothing can be done. Now, my own sense, I mean, I've never owned a bank. We just never had the expertise when I was at Data Bank to say that because we're a financial institution, we want to own a bank. We just did not have that and stuck to what we know how to do. But when you have an association in which through the period of these very difficult sort of AQRs that were determined, and the association does not seem to have teeth as to its self-regulatory response to issues, you then ask whether there's collective responsibility. A, to make sure your industry is clean, and to keep, agents who will not promote the sanctity of your industry. So we all become part of the bad behavior. And at the very least, we should all be part of rebuilding it. And so I think an honest discussion will reveal that, really, let's bet and share, so that we also share in the profits that are coming. Thank you very much.
Chairman, last question. That's my last question. Last question, Mr. Chairman. Very important question. Very, very important. Minister, I've been given the opportunity to ask you this question, which worries the private sector. They're asking, they send this question for me to find out from you how you will ensure that banks do not just take deposits and invest in government securities, but rather invest in the private sector. That's my last question.
Yeah.
From the private sector.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very, very good question. You would realize that we did a guarantee fund. We also have what we call GESL, which is supposed to support agric industry areas. I think even in countries as the United States, there are rules which ensure that community development are part of the remit of the banks. And so I think we may need to have a dialogue, as we develop the Oba-Atampa program, which is going to have discussions with banks, financial institutions, pension funds, as to their participation in this transformation exercise. And in that, I'm sure we can construct some agreements on how to ensure maybe some participation of some law. But these are things that will particularly be led by the BOG. It is when the government decides to either guarantee certain things to facilitate it. But I think the BAG is also anxious for growth within this stuff. And we hope that we will be able to, as the banks get profitable, have these discussions which will all move us together in this transformation exercise. And thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My first question to the honorable nominee relates to the annual report on the management and use of petroleum revenues, and in particular, the reports of PIAC, the Public Interest and Accountability Committee. And I believe it's in order, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, to congratulate PIAC on their 10th anniversary, which they celebrated yesterday. I noticed the President was with them yesterday. But let me begin with the 2019 report. At page 15 of the report, PIAC writes, and this is the report submitted to Parliament in compliance with the law. PIAC states, and I quote, "For the third consecutive year, the actual ABFA was not fully utilized or accounted for. It brings the total unutilized and unaccounted for ABFA to 1,479,896,299.86 Ghana cedis at end of 2019. It continues. The Ministry of Finance is acting with impunity regarding accounting for the use of ABFA. PIAC therefore urges Parliament to bring its oversight mandate to bear," unquote. I also hold in my hands an August 2020 issue paper that PIAC was forced to publish because of the continuous non-compliance. And at page 24 of the report, of the issue paper, PIAC had this to say: "The recurring non-compliance in the reported expenditure of the Ministry of Finance to the PRMA requirement to spend at least 70% of the ABFA on public investment expenditure is another challenge." In 2019, 55% was spent on capital expenditure and 45% spent on goods and services. Another challenge in the implementation of the law relates to the recurrence of unutilized ABFA. As at the end of 2019, the total unspent ABFA amounted to 1.48 billion Ghana cedis. This situation is worrying, especially as it is becoming a trend and corruption risk to the management and use of petroleum revenues. Honorable nominee, this has continued, and according to PIAC in the 2020 report to Parliament, they are putting the final figure of unaccounted for oil revenues at 2.46 billion as at end of June 2020. I am aware of meetings that have taken place between you and PIAC, and I know that PIAC stands by this figure of 2.46 billion Ghana cedis unaccounted for petroleum revenues. How do you respond to this, honorable nominee, and how can you assure this committee that if given the nod, what PIAC is calling a culture of impunity under your watch will stop?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned, we have had a series of meetings of PIAC to try and reconcile these numbers and their use. I can assure the House that this is not tantamount to any type of corruption from the ministry or the government in any way. We should be clear on that. With regards to, therefore, their number of 2.4 billion, in which they insist on, you can see that the President was at the ceremony yesterday, and that is an indication of our commitment to work with them to clear that. Mr. Chairman, let me assure you that all of these issues would be resolved, and we can have, a happy medium with PIAC going forward. We do not, there may be honest mistakes made, but there's no profligacy on our part or a sense of arrogance as to the use of public money. My training as an investor was to invest people's money, and that has to be protected. And so when you look at DataBank, it's investment of 500,000 people's money, and those are sacrosanct. Mr. Chairman, let me assure you that all of these things will be resolved, and we're going to have a period, these 4 years coming, in which we are all totally aligned. That's my commitment to you.
Mr. Chairman, by way of follow-up, is the honorable nominee able to give us an indication on when this will be resolved? You've given us an assurance that you will resolve this.
Well, we have had their 10-year anniversary. I am back full-time at work. We should, after the Easter break, have a meeting with the new chair and craft a way forward that will be comfortable for everyone and follow the tenets of the law. That assurance I give you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to my second question, which relates to, I would say, genuine growing concern about what some analysts are calling a stranglehold over the financial sector by your close business associates and allies. Some have even suggested that it's classic state capture, and that if this is not re-looked at, it would be inimical to Ghana's financial progress, and so far as best practice and transparency is concerned. I have the incorporation documents of the entities you have interest in: Data Bank Financial Services, Data Bank Asset Management, Data Bank Brokerage Limited, Enterprise Group of Companies. And I see that the directors and key shareholders are the persons that you have placed in very strategic positions. For example, you have Kelly Gajapo, who sits on the Bank of Ghana board. You have Reverend Ogbami Tete, who is Director General of the Securities and Exchange Commission. You know, they regulate the investment companies. You have Samson Akligo, who is Director of Financial Sector at the Ministry of Finance, and is also sitting on the board of the National Insurance Commission. So if you take the banking sector, you take the investment sector, you take the insurance sector, your close associates and directors, shareholders of your companies are in charge of the sector. How do you respond to genuine concern that there is some stranglehold, some state capture that is going on, and for that matter, we are not having a fair ecosystem for other businesses to thrive? And how do you even think that these regulators can regulate entities that you have beneficial interest in?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The issue of, state capture of a financial sector, I think it's a difficult one to behold. First of all, the Minister of Finance certainly has some sway with regards to whoever they appoint to be board members, and it could be Kojo Kwame or it could be Kelly. You would have put a person there. So is the state capture hidden because of the name or not? Is an issue. Issue of competence, I think is important here. And if you look outside of the state, you'll see that because of the 30 years in which the firm has run on values and skills, our alumni are everywhere in the banking and financial institution of deep influence in what they do. Should companies like ours create subpar personnel? We shouldn't. And if they have the technical requirements, should we or should we not lose them? I think it comes down to really whether we continue with a sense of cynicism and, a minister trying to enrich himself. I suspect that the issue of public service is one that really has been with the family for a long time, and I came into it with that aspect. That I do not take a salary, I do not take a per diem, so those are not the objectives that I come with. As I mentioned earlier, it was so easy to get a banking license over these 30 years if one chose to, but our expertise was in investment, and we are not going to drift because there were opportunities to do that. Did we have problems in these areas? We did, and therefore, would you have people that you trust that are professional to participate in those sectors? Yes, you will. So Kelly may be one of the directors at the central bank. That is out of maybe, 9 or something, in terms of coming into any organization with people that you feel have the capacity to help. Yeah, I think we have 10 directors at the ministry, of which we promoted to be coordinating directors, and Samson is one of the 10 directors. I think you also realize that in the past, maybe years, quite a number of years before we came into government, the Ministry of Finance lacked people with investment expertise, and so there was nothing happening promotionally in that area. And I think we should celebrate the entry of an investment expert into that ministry. So you could look at it, half empty or half full. You could be cynical about a motive to state capture industry. You could also look at the results of growth in the industry and say that something positive is happening. Accusations, therefore, of trying to stymie other competitors has never been our view. We have grown from a cantonment to enterprise 30 years ago into a high street enterprise. We know how to grow in small doses, and we have done that. So, Mr. Chairman, let me assure you that that cannot be the motive. If people are using the aftermath of the banking crisis as a way of finding data point to illuminate this, I think the results of where we are with the banking crisis is clear. I think DataBank's reputation as an investment house and not a banking institution is also very clear. And I think we also came to really do public service. And so far, that is what we have continued to do. So yes, they may declare that, but honorable members, I'll give you the assurance that we came into public service to serve. We came to bring the best skill set and to advance our promotion as a country. And the values that we brought with us will really not encourage us to assume such dastardly objectives for the nation.
Mr. Chairman, related to that is some key indicators people look at. For example, I hold in my hands the Damsel report, which is published by your own data bank, and you take one instrument like the M Fund, which was launched in 2004. The total assets under management from 2004 to 2017 was just a little above 313 million. But between 2017 and 2020, when you became finance minister, it shot up from 313 to 808 million, according to your own Damsel report. Over 500 million cedis, almost 500 million cedis in actual increment. That's some whopping 258%. And if you look at the previous years, the 13 or 14 years prior to 2017, since the M-Fund was launched. It has never done this well. So people are looking at these numbers. You take enterprise insurance, for example. When the ambulances that we purchased was to be insured, it was enterprise that was selected. Frontline healthcare workers, the insurance of our heroes in this COVID-19 fight is enterprise insurance, which your dear wife, our Rock of Ages, who we are all very proud of, is director of. So these are real numbers, real facts. Meanwhile, other businesses are collapsing and others are closing shop. So people are pointing to these real indicators. How do you respond to that? M-Fund and enterprise being given all of these big insurance deals under you as finance minister?
Thank you very much indeed for this question. I think we should really, Mr. Chairman, examine these issues properly. If you look in the landscape for asset management, we are talking, Mr. Chairman, about a 30-year company with incredible human resources that literally developed the asset management business. You would wonder whether that company was also victimized.
Honorable Minister, we can't hear you from here.
You would wonder also whether that company was also victimized in times when the political season was different. But I think that the key issue becomes one of competence and fair judgment, and when you come in to bid for certain things. Now the question about moving from 330 to 800 and something, as you mentioned, the question is, how much in resources and new monies were in the marketplace, and therefore what was the proportion of that to that. Should a company like that grow? Of course it should grow. We talk about enterprise insurance, you talk about what a company that is been here since 1924, which has built up a life business that is par none, and a general business that is par none. I think the challenge of companies that have durability and invest in their companies to build their balance sheets and train people, as opposed to new companies that are just registered, as happened in the banking institutions, leading to the collapse, should be really examined. I think it's easy, really, to just throw stones at it and say that it is because one is a finance minister. But as I assured you, I don't get involved in any of these things. I've not been a director since whatever. And maybe there's just more boldness in coming in to bid for things, and in people assessing the capacity of these companies. Really, I have told the NIC and these regulators that they ought to be publishing productivity, assets under management, etc. And maybe we as a government should be drawing a line that if you are below a certain amount capacity, you can manage our resources. There has to be a way in which we credit assess, as opposed to say, I also have a company and I couldn't do it. And I think that should be revelatory and transparent, and we should be looking to build first-class companies, but not ascribe it to the fact that somebody is a finance minister, etc., and that's why that is what is happening. So I will warrant a challenge for us to begin to look at the capacities of all of these companies before such easy talk is allowed, which is also quite demoralizing for building and investing in your people if you want to create first-class companies. But assurance that no, I do not get involved in these things. This work is for public service to enhance where the Republic is going. And if you have been able to build strong companies over a certain period, even over 30 years, surely there are times and opportunities in which that will show and illustrate that.
Mr. Chairman, finally from me will be a COVID question, and I make reference to Appendix 12A of the 2021 budget and financial policy document. If you look at the status of COVID-19 alleviation program, CAP 1, the entries in there, some of the numbers are very worrying. For example, if you take item number 5, transfer of Government of Ghana COVID account for Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration for airfares for 2,221 returnees from Lebanon.
Mr. Chairman, could I excuse myself for a second?
Very well.
Dr. Noguchi Hideo devoted himself to research of yellow fever, of which he eventually died in Ghana. Carrying on the spirit of Dr. Noguchi, the
And that, even that's a two-way ticket for $511. This is more than $4,000 looking at the exchange rate at the time. It doesn't appear to me that the public purse is being protected by some of these expenditures. You take item 4, transfer of 19.3 million cedis. The ministry is saying that they are not aware of this account. So the question is, will you support a special audit into the entire COVID-19 expenditure? Because some of these figures really, there are lots of questions.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's really a very simple issue. I will go back to confirm these and bring at least an initial report on these transactions of MFARA, and then we will take it from there. I know certain payments were made with regards to the gathering of these people in Lebanon, etc. But those are administrative issues that I'm sure we can sort out, so that it's not necessarily linked to the ticket per se. So give me the opportunity to relook at that. I think really the issue of COVID-19 2020 was a devastating one. I mean, the pressures to bring people home, the conditions they were in. I mean, I'm sure various ministries had to do some things in haste to avoid the suffering of Ghanaians wherever they may be. And we'll get to the bottom of this for you. Thank you, sir.
Very well. Yes, Honorable Gisela, I promised you that I'll give you the chance so you can go back to your committee. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Honorable Nominee.
Thank you very much.
Happy to see that you are fully recovered.
Amen. Thank you.
You have the strength for the job for the next 4 years.
Amen. It looks good, don't you think?
All right, I'm going to ask you something on the construction industry. Your ministry is a heartbeat of any government. Construction is also the heartbeat, one of the heartbeats, main heartbeats of the economy. If you get approved by this House, in your second term, are you going to reconsider the issue of contractors' payments vis-a-vis the basic project management principles of trying to adhere to time and budget on projects? Because there are a lot of cost overruns in the whole project management space. And a lot of it is because payments are not made on time, and so it is hard for contractors to keep to their work schedules, and then they have to go back to ministries to ask for rate reviews and so on and so forth. And ultimately, government is a loser. But all these decisions are being taken by people. So, as a custodian of the public purse, what will you do differently in your second term to make sure that this situation is changed for the better for the country? And also to realize that contractors have invested time and effort and money in their equipment, and their businesses are often run down when the political season, as my senior colleague here just mentioned the word, as the political season changes. Is there going to come a time in this country when that will change? Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And this is really a very significant question in our attempt to develop this nation, because it's really very easy to place the blame on one side of the coin as to government. But there's enough blame on both sides of government and contractors because of, I guess that's the nature of the way we have developed. As I mentioned earlier, we have a commitment, sort of control policy that we are bringing to Cabinet for approval, which essentially says that if you are given a budget, you have to stick within the budget. To be able to change it in any way, it has to come all the way through Cabinet, and you are to identify resources within your budget to do that. You would realize that, especially since we have devolved all power to the ministries with regards to whom they select, etc., etc. And invariably, you see add-ons to projects which are not there, and therefore keeps the cycle of arrears going. That must stop. And of course, that in a sense is initiated by contractors in a way. So we need to find a way to stymie that if this is what we are doing for this year, this is what we are doing for this year, and no more add-ons. And I think you'll be able to clear the arrears as we go on and not have projects that should not be in there doing it. I think we also have some issues of value for money, in which sometimes when you put consultants on to determine what it is that needs to be done, you have certain roads overlapping certain roads and being charged, as an extension of that, and therefore various projects on the same 5-mile stretch that has different fixed costs and vehicles allocated to them. All of these add up to cost that we should be able to stop. So I think that there's a need for quite a big overhaul in the way in which the contractors and the ministry operate. I know last year we set up a value for money overview team that has suggested various ways to tackle that. But I think we should, because Ghana is alleged to be one of sort of the highest costs for roads and stuff. So we should be working to clear that so that we can have certain costs that are sustainable, projects that should not be funded, should not come into the funding time, and then payments will be on time and projects will also be on time. We have also, as you know, agreed on what we call continuity and completion, so that at least all projects, irrespective of which government, will be looked at for completion as we move forward. So I think that there's going to be a big effort these 4 years to streamline how projects are approved, and B, to also continue to complete projects that exist, so that there will be a little bit more robustness in the construction industry. The issue of PPPs are also going to be promoted, and we now have having discussions and MOUs with Ghana Investment and Infrastructure Fund as to how to look at major projects, so that it's not necessarily on government budget books, but on an investment scheme which then returns rewards for GIF.
Thank you. You had a scheme, I think it was a policy that you developed at the ministry, whereby contractors were asked to present their certificates, and the certificates were discounted by, was it 10 to 15%? I'm not sure of the percentage. How efficient and how effective was that policy, if you can tell us?
Thank you very much. I mean, my sense was that it did well. But Mr. Chairman, this is really not sort of a new thing with regards to contractors discounting their certificates to be able to. It's an old instrument that is done. It created a bit of uproar, and then contractors came to the realization that it was to their benefit, and I think it worked very well and reduced the amount of arrears in there. So I think it helped with the issue of reducing the stress in the industry and put some liquidity in the market for it.
All right. Well, I think that it was more a case of some contractors just being desperate for cash, and so having to wipe off their profits that they have made over the years as they were just waiting to have their certificates cleared. So I think that some of these policies, even if it was an old one, as you come in, you try to make improvements on the system. So I'm hoping that that will also be done so that it can be a more effective way, perhaps, of releasing some cash, as you said, onto the market. But effectively, as you know, a lot of contractors do not have the luxury of interest on delayed payments on GOG projects and so on and so forth. So it really hits them hard. And I hope that
I'm disabled. Good. Yes, can you proceed with the question?
Thank you
very
much.
You can advise him later when we are done with him.
Exactly. Thank you very much. But I'm just trying to advocate for the construction industry because it's only fair and right to do so. Madam, please, hold your peace. Thank you. Mr. Honorable Nominee, I see you're almost always in white. What's the secret behind it?
Actually, it's Ecclesiastes 9:9, which says that, I guess be grateful for where you are, anoint your hair. And I think it says love your wife or something like that.
So on that white note, Mr. Honorable Nominee, I would wish that, and I would pray that with that same heart of whiteness, you remember those people who invested their monies in all these financial institutions that were collapsed.
Amen.
And you remember that they also could need some relief.
Amen.
Because they've been sitting there just waiting patiently for their money. And people have lost their loved ones. Some have had illnesses and so on and so forth. Yes. Thank you very much. So have a heart for them. And do the needful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll give you one lady. I'll go to a gentleman before I come back to a lady. Yes, Hassan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honorable Ofori-Atta, I congratulate you, and I wish you well. I have had opportunity to work very closely with you, especially in relation to dumping in the petroleum sector, and the tremendous support that I received from you has to be put on record. You are a very strong pillar of support in the fight against, illicit trading in the petroleum sector. First question I have is, in relation to standing orders of this House, and I know you don't have any powers to change it, but it has to do with the mode of reading the annual budget. I have a feeling sometimes that it's an exercise in determining who has more stamina than the other. From Kwesi time, Professor Kwesi time, you come and sit there and then stand on your feet, read budget for fast, too long, minimum 3 hours. I don't think that is, the way to go. Can't we have a much redacted version? Lay it, and then you go. What do you think about this? I mean, we've been doing it, so we think maybe that is the right thing. But you go across other jurisdictions.
As you said, that is parliament arrangement in accordance with this.
I just want his opinion on it.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, our GDP, it's about 400 billion, and we expect this thing to grow as we grow into a middle-income, rich country, God willing, in the near term. We're going to have a huge budget that is going to be impossible to. But I suspect Parliament would adjust itself to make sure it gets the minister in Parliament for the appropriate time and still have the time to debate that. Because certainly the budget is not read in the United States Congress. It's just too huge for OMB to do that. So I'll leave it to you as we grow and you adjust your standing orders accordingly.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, in 2020, the government paid in excess of about $1 billion to the IPPs. Similarly, ECG also made payments also around 2.7 billion Ghana cedis to the same IPPs. And there's been some negotiations with these IPPs regarding, possibility of making some more savings from the excess capacity. Can you update the committee on where we stand with some of these negotiations and whether there is a possibility that we can make further gains regarding excess capacity charges? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. I think we have been in the past 18 months having negotiations with Senate, SemPower, Early Power, Mandi, AXA, Car Power, and I think Nasogli. We have gone some ways with Senate. I think there was some stalling during 2020 as the OPEC DFC invested companies and the Japanese SemPower, Early Power, and Mandi sort of waited. This has now gotten into high gear as to the discussions on term sheets that we are doing. We also have had extensive discussions with AXA and giving them a term sheet that they have come back to us with. I think we've gotten to literally a break-even point where my feeling is that by September we should have been able to renegotiate these to save the country considerable resources. So we are moving in the right direction, and we expect to make quite huge savings in that score. As you know, we also introduced some taxes this year to see whether we can close the gap between what the ECG pays and the tariffs that they get. So that's the two-pronged approach that we have taken to sort out the imbalances we have in the system.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Well, the dilemma of a minister of Finance is that your colleagues are pulling you from different angles. The colleague ministers and other agencies, everybody needs money. Now, where to get the funds, you have to go and borrow or you levy taxes. Either of the two, people are attacking you from left, right, center. How do you manage to survive all of this? How do you, because my meetings with you are mostly after midnight. I wonder how you rest. I mean, how do you do all of these things? The balance.
Thank you very much for the sympathies here. But I remember Madame Lagarde saying, in effect, that if a finance minister is loved, then he's not doing his job. So that goes with the territory. But I think truly the excitement and really the blessing of being a finance minister is the overview that you get and the sense of apportionment as you see your president's vision and see how you get there and to shield the vision from the individual needs of your colleague ministers and somehow apportion it. But to also think deeply and challenge the status quo really as to how best to use these limited resources to go very far. At the same time, you know everybody is a citizen and therefore has the right to be able to have social mobility as you have. And that is a challenge. So the issue of, let's say, senior high school education is a matter of choice. What kind of percentage of GDP do you give to ensure that the average person like you can also become like you because the state has given that opportunity. And so I think it's that adrenaline and passion that keeps one going, and to understand that you've been given a mission or a role to play that is important for the growth of the Republic. So thanks for recognizing the difficulties, but we shall continue to persevere.
Yes, Honorable Kapoko.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. That's okay. Is it not working?
It's working. It's working. It's working.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. My first question has to do with the report of the Auditor General for the year 2019. As you are all aware, democracy dictates that power must be exercised in consonance with the law. Unfortunately, the Auditor General's report indicates that in 2018, the Ministry of Finance acted not in consonance with the laws of our land, and that occasioned some kind of misappropriation amounting to 193 million Ghana cedis. Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence,
Mr. Chairman, with your indulgence, I'd like to refer to the report. Paragraph 139 of the 2019 Auditor General's report states that Section 69 of the Revenue Administration Act 2016 Act 915 states that the minister shall set aside an amount of not more than 6% of the total revenue collected under this act and any other enactment administered by the Commissioner General in an account designated as the Ghana Revenue Authority General Refund Account, from which refunds due under this act and refunds due under any other tax law shall be paid by the Commissioner General. Contrary to the above provision, a total amount of 193,277,758.03 Ghana cedis was used in settling payments other than for tax refunds. Then a table is provided. Some companies have been mentioned for the year 2018. All these payments were made. It's a long table. But Mr. Chairman, the most interesting part is that paragraph 142 states, management in response stated that it acted on directives from the Finance Ministry to effect the payments from the refund account. So the Ministry of Finance directed the management of the fund to set aside, to suppress the loss, and then use the monies in that fund to make payments outside the law. What is the minister's take on this, and why did the minister or the ministry decide to engage in such an illegality, knowing very well that our actions must be detected by the laws of the land?
Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think I'm sure the House has had reason to contest some of the statements of the Auditor General. I mean, my understanding really of the law in terms of 6% for tax refunds is really inclusive of the fact that this is part of revenue mobilization costs and not necessarily operational costs. So I guess in my interpretation, and I guess that's subject to debate, was that actions that we took that led to revenue mobilization qualify under this. And I think that's something that we can all debate and decide on. I mean, you do get refunds, and so when we also mobilize the resources to be able to pay you. And so that in my mind, was a categorization that justified that, but certainly not an illegality.
Mr. Chairman, my second question. In October 2020, the Honorable Minister, the Honorable Nominee, participated in the virtual plenary session of the Development Committee of the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. As part of your contributions to the discussions, you called for debt forgiveness and cancellation for vulnerable and debt-distressed countries in the world, including Ghana. You also seized the opportunity of that occasion to call for the extension of the debt service suspension initiative introduced by the G20 for vulnerable countries, including Ghana. You are aware that the public debt stock stood at 122 billion Ghana cedis when you assumed office in January 2017. Today, the debt stock has ballooned to 291 billion Ghana cedis. And when you look at the 2021 budget, the projections that you have placed before this House, in 2021, you project to raise a total revenue plus grants of 72 billion Ghana cedis. And you project to pay interest on debts amounting to 35 billion Ghana cedis. Amortization of 15 billion Ghana cedis. If you put amortization and interest on debt together, that will give you 50 billion Ghana cedis, plus compensation of 30 billion will be 80 billion Ghana cedis. Meaning that even if you are able to raise all the revenues that you have projected and receive all the grants projected, that will not be able to pay for interest, amortization, and compensation, leaving a huge gap for you to borrow to fail. So it means that this year, we are to borrow to be able to pay compensations, goods and services, and even statutory payments. These are symptoms of an ailing economy, an economy that is indeed in the doldrums and gasping for breath. You want us to give you the opportunity to serve for another term. What new strategies do you propose to reverse this situation and to restore hope among Ghanaians?
Thank you very much indeed for this question, Mr. Chairman. We have indeed moved from 122 billion to 292 billion, which is about 76% of GDP as we look at it. I think we identified right from the beginning in 2017 the 5 buckets of revenue, expenditure, statutory payments, interest, and compensation as weaknesses in which we needed fiscal space. We have, as you know, over this period, the fiscal impact of COVID of maybe 19 to 20 billion, financial sector cleanup of 21 billion, excess capacity charges paid, also inherited, of 12 billion, the impact of reduction in growth from average of 7% to 0.9%, changes in forex, etc. So we have a number of ways that, of course, this can be approached. As you mentioned, we did ask for debt forgiveness on that side. We have, I think, been successful with the US approving some 500 billion SDRs, which will go at much lower interest rates for countries such as ours. That will be helpful. As you know, we have begun to examine issues as to what we do with our gold and cocoa, which will lead to equity in the system, and that has to be looked at. But if you look at the Obatampa program, and what we expect to do with regards to an increase of 30 billion over the next 3 years from GRA and a 7 billion infusion from outside. Those are all productivity elements that would increase exports and therefore trade numbers so that we can be more productive and export-driven, adding value to our resources. Akufo-Addo's vision of therefore adding value to all of our natural resources is the way to go to do that. So clearly we have foreseen this and we are doing what we can to do that. I mean, I think there's one other area of importance that we should think about, which really is the digitalization of our economy. In that is where all these leakages that we have will be stopped. We literally should be able to double our GRA proceeds, which should bring another 45 odd billion to be able to address these issues. I think we are going a long way with digitalization. We are committed to finding the resources to do that, and that would ensure that we all participate in this. Mr. Chairman, yes, we've gone through a period of 4 years in which, in a sense, we stabilized the economy until the COVID disruption. We will get back to normalcy as we target debt sustainability back to a deficit that is within 5%, ensure that the Batampa project is on course, look at ways in which we add value to our exports before we let them go, so that we transform the economy and not get back into issues of increasing debt. But I guess as you look also at the new normal, most economies have had to ratchet up debt. I think Africa's debt has moved from 34 to 56% or so in short order. And most G20 countries are spending over 20% of GDP to make sure that they put that type of resources in that. So the world is adjusting to this new normal of debt sustainability, and we are part of it. But we, at the very least, have put in a program to see how we get out of that dragnet.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I'm indulging, Chairman, indulge me. Minister, in your answer, you are certain that public debt is 92 billion. Now, are you rounding up? Because as I look at paragraph 149, page 36 of the budget, I see 291,614. Is it that since 12 March, we've added on, or you have done quick and easy mathematics of a round up to 292 billion? I just want it for a record.
Mr. Chairman, it's 291.6 billion, 76.1%.
Rounded up in your words to 292 billion.
That's right.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Another dimension to our national debt discussion, which portrays a very gloomy picture for the upcoming generation, has to do with the collateralized borrowings. Honorable Minister will recall that after the conclusion of the Article 4 consultation of the IMF with Ghana, the IMF cautions the Ghanaian government against collateralized borrowing. The government decided not to heed that genuine advice. And as we speak, the Ghana Get Fund receivables has been monetized for $1.5 billion from the Chinese government, payable within the next 10 years. They have also monetized receivables from the energy sector levies for 15 years. Cocoa has been collateralized for $600 million, payable within 7 years. They have also collateralized bauxite deposits in the Tiwa Forest area for $2 billion, for a $2 billion from the Chinese under the Sino-Hydro deal. And now, the president hints of a Japan in the pipeline, which will also take care of the royalties that we receive from gold. Honorable nominee, all these collateralized borrowings are not calculated as part of our debt stock. But you know, it comes as a huge liability for the future. Have you not, by this collateralization, imposed huge liabilities on the upcoming generation? Because future revenues that will service future conditions have been monetized for present expenditure. Have you not imposed huge liabilities on our children?
Thank you very much for that question. And I think we I guess, debate the issues of how a country develops and use its resources ring-fenced to ensure that those areas give us the best return for our monies. When we look at GET Fund, for example, and we look at the human capacity, we talk about SHS. I think in my view, I don't even believe that the whole issue of human capital should be addressed as goods and services. It's essential that we look at it as a capital cost that is important for the future. And then you begin to look at interventions in our economy that are important for us to grow. So you talk about energy, and you have to be clear on how you reduce costs so that industrialization will occur. You look at cocoa, you begin to find ways in which you can capitalize on today, so that, as I mentioned, you are part of the 140 billion stream as opposed to the 3 billion stream. You have your bauxite locked up for good, and how do you bring it to shore or turn it into alumni or aluminium over a certain period. So the question is whether we as Ghanaians trust that we'll be able to turn these resources to add value to these areas so that we gain the benefit of that. And that is the discussion, not one of just putting debt for the future without productivity return on that. And I think all of these things can yield, GET Fund to make sure that our human capital is more productive than before, ESLA to make sure that we have energy that supports industrial growth, cocoa and bauxite to make sure we add value to it and get into the supply chain at values that are good for us. So it's after 60 years of nation building, I think we need to rethink that. And I think this 8th meeting of Parliament offers us an opportunity as a nation with a balanced Parliament to begin to really ask the question as to how best do we find the resources to transform our economy, and what should we put in place as we get into these collateralized transactions and equity-related transactions such as EJAPA. And I think it's up to us really to begin to speak a common language of understanding of where we want to go as a nation, and not debate every issue that truly will lead to a transformation of our economy. I think, I mean, if you look at the cocoa industry, for example, I mean, it's a real injustice that the average farmer, 650,000 families, sweat, cut their legs, are bitten by snakes, and then we give them 70% of the producer price. While there's a whole derivative market and value add of 140 billion, and we sit and benefit from the 2-3 billion they bring, and we have not been able to find a solution to participate in that part of the industry, so that we actually may even be able to pay them double what they earn for the seed. And so those are the real questions we should ask ourselves. Are we doing our people justice by just sitting on the old way in which we do things? And if we bring such things to the table, how do we, as a nation, speak the same language to make sure that we get the best results from it? Because other countries are doing that. And why can't we do that? Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, my last question. In the 2019 State of the Nation address, His Excellency the President of the Republic of Ghana, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, indicated that his government has procured
Otherwise, on a mimiapan pola plenya selava wona jifian ya. Abale minye mi wona cha, benye yauda. Minna, miawe, wanyu wona nye ya. Kele fian ya hanu kai ule benye paklo miawo. Abe viene, abe du come viene, abe Ghana viva vanwene, le du come nanyu. Fian ya, eyo nyebe mile miape heritage month,
and for having you back in good health. And we pray that the good Lord will continue to sustain you in good health for the onerous duties ahead of you in the event that we approve your nomination. Mr. Chairman, we know, and I see from the budget statement, that there is an emphasis on digitalization under the Ghana Cares program. Laudable as it is, it needs to ride on robust digital infrastructure. Now, access to the internet ought to be treated as much of a utility as access to water or electricity, in view of the crucial role that digital technology plays in keeping society functioning by enabling remote working, automating processes, facilitating contactless transactions, amongst others. Can we get the commitment from you of funding for digital infrastructure that we so desperately need to create our digital economy, just as the government funds electricity and water infrastructure?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Excellent question. I think really we'll be sort of putting our heads in the sand if we don't accept that the digital age is upon us. And maybe in a sense it may be more than water and electricity for the type of livelihood modernization and transformation that we require. And so I think we at the ministry are very clear on finding resources for that. I think they are up on our World Bank books. But even as we look at what we are doing with raising funds, Eurobond market, we certainly are going to put resources into that. That is a commitment. It allows us to revenue mobilize to a level that will be quite impactful and reduce our debt flows. And so that's a commitment that I do.
I'm glad for that assurance and restatement of your commitment.
Mr. Chairman, 1 second.
Okay.
You're done. Oh, Very well. Honorable Esla, you may proceed.
Mr. Chairman, in our interactions with your ministry, the Ministry of Finance, during the preparations for successive budgets, we've always advocated that funding for NITA, the National Information Technology Agency, in terms of the connectivity and the work it does for ministries, departments, and agencies, which largely go unpaid for, should be deducted at source and paid to them. Because interventions like GIFMIS, the HRMIS, all of it ride on the services provided by NITA. And when that's done, functioning of key government installations become problematic. Now, when that network is done and the agencies have to use the private sector, they have to pay sometimes up to 3 times as much as they would be required to pay for NITA. Can we, going forward, in subsequent budgets, devise a scheme whereby a line item in each ministry's goods and services allocation would be set aside to pay for the services that they enjoy from the National Information Technology Agency, which also frees them to get the needed resources to improve upon their output and make life easier for all of us?
Thank you very much indeed. I think it's an idea that we'll have to examine. We're going to have to be able to put huge resources into this area and also get efficiencies from our MMDAs and responses that are quick and efficient. So yes, we will do. I'm sure the beginning will be difficult and may require some government subsidy. But with our understanding of how to appreciate our revenues, I'm sure we can find a solution to it. But I think this COVID period has also brought into light the real need for digitalization across every sphere of our life and the savings that we have garnered in this way. For example, we are now doing a roadshow virtually, which we thought we couldn't have. I can imagine the savings in airfare and hotels that have accrued to us through that. So there are many ways in which also we can unburden employees in terms of working and from home and being a modern society. So there should be solutions to this that would ensure that NITA continues to be stronger and attracts the best people in the field to support the government. And we will have your back on that one.
Thanks for that assurance. Now, in a similar vein, the Cybersecurity Act has been passed by Parliament last year, establishing the Cybersecurity Authority and the Cybersecurity Fund. And yet, the budget is silent on funding for those activities. And going forward, it's going to be a bit of a challenge to get them going. And so, maybe this wouldn't be a question, but it's a suggestion that we would have conversations around how to operationalize the Cybersecurity Authority to protect the digital infrastructure that we're putting in place, because cybersecurity is the other half of the coin of digitalization. And without focusing on that, we expose the infrastructure that and services we're putting in place to cyber attacks. So, Mr. Minister-Designate, where do we go forward from that?
Thank you. I think cybersecurity is an area that national security has also identified as key to the protection of the Republic, the state. And therefore, has also given a sense of the cost of that, and that is being considered. My expectation is that your ministry and national security will come together so that we have a sense of the cost in this area for us to be able to find the resources for it. But there are conversations as to how to centralize and ensure that we are covered. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That will be all.
So, you can take yours now then.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, just to take note, I hope that I've been listening to the nominee, and I hope that he's not taking this parliamentary approval for granted, given his response during a question put to him by Honorable Ablakwa in relation to PIAC. He said, and I quote, "I am back for full time and will soon have a meeting with PIAC to resolve it." That, I'm sure, will be contingent on whether or not this practice, this approval goes through. I just thought that he should be reminded, and I hope he's not taking the approval for granted. But, Mr. Chairman, to my substantive question. Yes, I want to find out from the nominee if, well, I think that he does. Mackenzie is a company that he spoke to earlier when the minority leader warmed him up, and he admitted that they have a contract with GRA and the Ministry of Finance. KRL International is another company of interest to me. I just want to find out, first of all, if the honorable nominee worked with these companies prior to becoming Minister of Finance in any capacity. Did you work with Mackenzie in any way, and KRL International?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I have known KRL and also known Mackenzie with individuals in that place. We have not had any formal engagements with Mackenzie prior to that. There are a number of Ghanaian high officials there who sort of give advice on how things are going. KRL also have known the CEO for a while she worked with the president of Liberia in many ways. So we do know them.
Right, maybe as a follow-up, what about Strategic Mobilization Ghana Limited and KGL Tech that is currently in a contract with the NLA and operating online with the NLA 590? What about those two, Strategic Mobilization Ghana Limited and KGL?
I do know the CEO of KGL.
That's one. You didn't speak of Strategic Mobilization Ghana Limited. You don't know that one.
SML. I do know SML too.
How do you know them? How related are you to them? In a business wise or just social?
No, I don't have any business relationship with anybody.
Mr. Chairman, I will move on to my second question. We may come back to that question, but to my second question. So, Honorable Nominee, you, in your former portfolio as Minister of Finance, presented a memo to Cabinet, a joint memo with the then Energy Minister. And on April 26, 2019, Mercy Deborah Karikari, who is Secretary to Cabinet at the Office of the President, wrote a letter requesting the memo to be sent to Parliament for consideration. Mr. Chairman, I'm referring here to the ACA deal. The Minister of Finance, you received the letter that was written on the same day, and then the same day you authored another joint memo to Parliament. After a review, Parliament expressed some grave concerns, including reduction in GMPC participating interest, ex-bloco 24% commercial interest being abandoned, etc., etc. Now, it is held by some industry watchers that the renegotiation hurt Ghana's interest, and that it was merely aimed at creating an opportunity for a 25-days-old company at the time, which you have familiar relations with, Quad Energy, to acquire 5% of the biggest oil field in Ghana. And in about 30 days after its set up, it became about $500 million worth after it was formed 30 days and it acquired this 5%. Can you allay the fears of people who think that this whole renegotiation was just for Quad Energy to get this 5%?
Mr. Chairman, I mean, truly, I find this speculative and contrived, and I would need a lot more evidence to be able to. I can just categorically to tell you that that is not the way I operate, and whatever speculations or drummed up stories that they may have needs to be verified.
A follow-up. Ghana's interest was hurt in that whole renegotiation. You have not spoken to that, the fact that GMPC's participating interest got reduced. Ex-Bloco, which was to have 24% commercial interest in that transaction that was entered into in 2013, was abandoned. And then came Quad.
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for this question. I think, you know, essentially, oil transactions have always been fraught with expectations of insider dealings, etc. I just want to tell you that that is not the way I operate. I know ACA transaction also involved the redevelopment of our ports, certain support for SMEs and other areas that we felt were important for the growth of the shipping industry in Ghana, and also SME development and plastic clearing from our seas, etc., to do that. But to impugn that one was involved in some Quad Energy to make $500 million and to intentionally hurt the Republic, I think it's just outlandish.
So how did Quad Energy acquire that 5%?
I mean, we'll have to go into that, but really, Mr. Chairman, let me assure you that there's absolutely no way one will sit around a table and negotiate for the Republic to be at the short end of the stick.
Well, let's look at this other report on some missing revenues, tax revenues. This is a story that was started and gained a lot of currency on social media when a letter purported to have emerged from the audit service dated 5th October 2020 was circulated. The letter was variously denied. I mean, the contents of the letter was variously denied by GCB. And the audit service, however, confirmed that some sort of audit was going on, sanctioned by you on 15th August 2020, involving some transfers of tax revenues to some unknown sources. The figure that was bandied around was about 52.5 billion Ghana cedis at the time. I mean, what is with this audit that you sanctioned on 15th August 2020, which is the basis of what may be true or not true in relation to transfer of tax revenues?
I think I would like to get more information on this specific transaction. And your contention is what?
My contention is to settle the back and forth. The fact that this letter exists, audit service admits that you instructed that some sort of audit be done on this tax revenue transfers, but disputes that these tax transfers were made to unknown sources by GCB.
Okay. So this is a GCB issue that the ministry was trying to resolve.
I will not know until you perhaps tell us the purpose of that audit that the audit service admits you sanctioned to be carried out in a letter dated 15th August 2020.
So this was what in pursuit.
Honorable Minister, let me clarify it. Have you instructed audit service to do any audit of GCB? So the question is not clear.
So what
Can you clarify?
Letter? Do you have the letter?
Mr. Chairman, I have a letter here.
Okay.
The letter is supposed to be from audit service. It is dated 5th October 2020. It's captioned transfers of tax revenues by GCB to unknown sources. 52.5 billion Ghana cedis. Findings. Regulations 12 of the Financial Administration Regulation, FAR 2004 stipulates, quote, a person entrusted with custodial duties for public and trust monies shall protect public and trust monies against unlawful diversion from the, and it goes on. But I'm saying that after this letter was circulated widely on social media, GCB issued a statement to deny that they had transferred this amount of money to unknown sources. The audit service, however, issued a statement to also deny the contents of this letter, but admitted that you had instructed them to carry out audits into transfers of tax revenues. So So the question is, what is with this audit that you instructed that has led to these speculations from all these banks? What is it about? That's the question.
You know, there are a number of things that we are trying to do in terms of protecting the public first. For example, if you get an IDF and therefore you are given, let's say, $5 million to import goods, okay? We then went back to look at whether when you declare when your goods are in, that truly $5 million have been used. So we tried to put a tracer on some of those things. We also began to look at banks that collect money and say, look, do you put the money back in state coffers within 48 hours? And we're seeing some anomalies in those places. So those are exercises that we are now beginning to perform to see our relationship with the banks and what they are doing. But I suppose all you are asking, in a sense, is the rigor with which we are now beginning to look at ways in which there are leakages. I can follow up specifically on that. But essentially, it's a heightened follow-up now that we are doing to these inconsistencies that we are beginning to see or have been going on for a long time. So this may be part of the whole issue of ensuring that the leakages are stopped.
Very well. Thank you. Yes. We've done 2 hours now. Honorable Minister, I want to bring proceedings to a close. We'll continue tomorrow to come only to leadership. Is that okay? Tomorrow we'll resume here at 10 a.m. for the leadership only.
1 hour.
I don't trust them with 1 hour. They will do more.
2 hours.
Mr. Chairman, you are suggesting that we close for today and come for 1 hour to meet the leadership tomorrow.
Well, we'll come for tomorrow. When they say 1 hour, I don't trust them. And then I have my leadership on the right who will also join in. So we may do not less than 2 hours tomorrow. Is that okay with you?
I think we have to agree. Thank you very much, sir.
Sorry?
Thank you very much, sir.
Very well. Thank you. So we will resume tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Independence.